Hello, my name is Jonathan Harris. Welcome to another Worldwide Camera Exchange video. Today I'm going to talk you through the various Hasselblad lenses available on the second-hand market. Now they have been made for 50 plus years, so it can get a bit confusing. Fundamentally, Hasselblad have built two types of camera during that period. They built the 2000 series cameras, which have an inbuilt focal plane shutter, and they have the far more common 500 series cameras, which have a shutter in the lens. I don't know the exact figures, but I suspect for every 50 500 series camera, they probably sold one F-series camera. So the 500 series cameras are the ones that you generally come across, and they're the ones that I would always recommend. I wouldn't particularly recommend the 2000 series cameras because the large inbuilt focal plane shutter wasn't actually particularly reliable. But lenses were different. For the 2000 series cameras, Hasselblad produced the F lenses. Now the F lenses only have an aperture. They don't need a shutter because the shutter is in the camera. Separately, they produced the C series lenses, which did have an inbuilt shutter. Obviously, the 500 series cameras don't have a focal plane shutter, so the shutter needs to be in the lens. I'm going to talk about now the C series lenses for the 500 cameras. So, first of all, there was the standard C lens. These were introduced in the late 1960s. They were produced in black and in chrome. You'll see they have quite a heavy metal knurling there on the focusing and a fairly heavy metal knurling on the shutter speed dial. You'll also see as I move the aperture, the aperture indicators move in and out to indicate the depth of field, which is actually a really nice feature. You might also notice that as I turn the dial here, the shutter speed and the aperture are both locked. Now with these early lenses, you would take a reading off your meter and it would give you an EV of 6 or 8 or 10. You then transfer that EV to the lens here. Once that EV is locked into position, you can then turn the camera over and you have a choice of shutter speed and aperture to choose. Quite a clever idea, but an idea that didn't last through the 1970s. Now these are available in two colours. You'll see these in chrome and in black. The chrome ones are generally pre-1970. I wouldn't particularly recommend them because they are now getting very, very old. And some of the spares for these C-type lenses are becoming hard to find. I would generally recommend the later black lenses. Also, at roughly the same time, Zeiss and Hasselblad, Zeiss make the lenses for Hasselblad, produced a T-star coating, and you'll see this on most of the modern Hasselblad lenses. You'll see that there's just a red T-star. That's a newer multi-coating that was introduced in the early 1970s. Now, most of the black lenses you'll find will have the T-star coating. Some of the earlier chrome lenses will have the T-star coating, but generally speaking, if it's chrome, it won't have. If it's black, it will have. But just check to be safe. I'd recommend the T-star coating because it does improve optical performance. Now, the black C-type lens, this version was made until early 1980s when Hasselblad introduced the CF lens. Now this is the CF lens. Looks quite a lot more modern. It's got a rubberized focusing ring here, and the shutter speed dial is rubberized. It's got a more traditional depth of field scale, so you've lost those moving indicators. And if you look, the shutter and aperture settings move independently. If you do want to lock them, you can using that button there. But most photographers these days do tend to set using apertures and shutter settings rather than using the old-fashioned EV range. So it's a more modern looking lens. It's also got, I don't know if you can see, it's also got a slightly different, bigger front. Most of the CF lenses have a bayonet 60 fitting filter, which is 60mm across. The older C and CT star type lenses have a 50mm filter fitting. So, of the two, I would certainly recommend the CF. They are a bit more expensive, but they're newer. They do tend to be more reliable. These older C lenses do suffer a fair bit with sticky slow speeds. and do probably need to be serviced more often to keep them in top-notch condition. So up to the early 1980s, C-type lens. In the early 1980s, they introduced the CF lens. And in the 1990s, they introduced the CFE and CFI lenses. Now, this is a CFI lens. The CFE lens is virtually identical, except it just has some little gold contacts on the mounts, which aren't really relevant for most 500 series camera users. The CFE and CFI lenses, again, have got a slightly more modern look about them. Although, personally, I have to say I do prefer the CF design. But they do have a slightly more modern look about them, with a redesigned focusing and a focusing ring and a redesigned shutter ring there. Hasselblad did say they'd made some improvements to this mechanically. Although I have to say, as a dealer, I have sold hundreds and hundreds of these and hundreds of the CF versions. And I've noticed no difference whatsoever in reliability. I suppose if your budget stretches to the newer version, go for the newer version because it is newer. So that fundamentally is it. Just to recap, you have the F lenses, which don't have a built-in shutter, so you ignore those completely. You then have the C-type lenses, which were made in the 70s and 80s. If you can, go for the black version. They're replaced by the CF lenses, which were made throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, and then right at the end of Hasselblad's film production run, you had the CFE and CFI lenses. So I hope that's been useful. If you have any questions, please just drop them in the box below. I'll always try to respond if I can. It's always good to hear feedback from people. Otherwise, please subscribe and like, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.